Hello everyone, this is Jonathan Little, and today I'm going to be sharing a hand with you that I played during the 2015 World Series of Poker that demonstrates an important concept that you must master if you want to have success in poker tournaments. Of course, there are a lot of things that you must constantly be thinking about, but especially in tournaments that have soft fields, like the World Series of Poker events, you have to be very aware that you must conserve chips whenever you possibly can. And you can do this in many ways, but this hand is going to demonstrate one of the main ways you can go about conserving chips. So I have ace-7 suited in third position with 12,000 chips at 50-100. A splashy guy limps from second position, and I'm fine with raising or calling or even folding. I don't think it really matters what you do too much. If this player who limped was in later position, meaning I was also in later position, I would be somewhat inclined to raise. But whenever he's limping from early position, if I raise, I'm likely going to get called by someone yet to act, and then that means I'm going to be playing a marginal hand out of position, which is not really where I want to be. And also, ace-7 suited flops well enough. It's not like it's a strong enough hand to purely raise for value, and I'm okay limping. I don't really want to force the splashy guy to stop limping. A lot of people think, oh, I need to punish the limpers. But all that really does is it induces the limpers to stop limping, especially if they're competent. And this hand is from a $1,500 buy-in event, so it's a smaller World Series event, but at the same time, it still is a relatively medium or high-ish buy-in event. So I like limping in this scenario most of the time. Oh, looks like I restarted the hand. So I limp, folds around to a loose, aggressive guy, and the cutoff, who raises to 400. And at this point, I'm pretty much always going to call 300 more with ace-7 suited and try to get a good flop. I don't think there's any real purpose in folding at this point. I expect the splashy guy to call most of the time, but he actually folds this time, which means he really is limping a lot of trash. And I decide to see the flop. So we get a very good flop. Ace-Queen-7, we have two pair. It's effectively the nuts. I check, and my opponent checks behind. So there is a little bit of merit in leading into your opponent, but in general, you have to think about your opponent's raising range, right? It's going to contain a lot of hands that are top pair, which I beat currently, and then also a lot of hands that are nothing, like King-Jack, pocket tens, etc. And those hands are not really going to put much money in the pot if I bet. So this is a spot where I definitely want to check. I want to let my opponent bet, and I plan on check raising and putting him in a tough spot with all of his relatively strong value hands. That's going to be my general play. I'm not really concerned about running into ace-queen, pocket sevens, pocket queens, or aces. Those are all fairly unlikely, and most likely my opponent's going to have a hand like ace-king, ace-jack, ace-10 whenever he does call the check raise, and that's going to allow me to pile a lot of money in the pot very happily. So it goes check-check. When it goes check-check, I expect my opponent to have either a marginal ace, because he probably thinks he can't bet and get called by too many worse hands if he bets with something like ace-6, or he's going to have a hand like pocket kings or king-queen that is trying to get closer to showdown for the same reason that I did not think you'd be betting with the ace-x. So that's roughly the range I'm giving my opponent. He may be slow playing something like pocket queens, but again, that's incredibly unlikely. So turns another ace, which gives me the second nuts. I am thrilled. And I decided to bet 850. Notice I bet 850 into the 1,000 chip pot. At this point, remember I mentioned this video is about conserving chips, but here we're not really trying to conserve chips. We have the effective nuts and we are trying to build a big pot. So at this point we're trying to extract maximum value. And if my opponent does have one of those hands that I just listed, being ace-x, which he's never going to fold, pocket kings, which he's probably never going to fold to one bet, and king-queen, queen-jack, something like that, he's also not going to fold that to one bet. I want to make that one bet as big as possible to ensure that I get maximum value from those hands. So this is a spot where you definitely want to be betting on the larger side, assuming you think that is what your opponent's check behind range is. If you think his check behind range is a lot of trash, like 9-8 of diamonds, then it doesn't really matter what you do because you're probably not going to get any money in the pot anyway. But usually you'll find that most players are checking behind with hands that are hands that have marginal value. Okay, so I bet 850 on the turn, and my opponent calls, which is great. I fully expect him to show up with one of those hands I just said. River's a 5, and now the pot is 2,700. So If I think my opponent has ace X, or any ace, like ace king, ace jack, whatever, I want to bet very large because there's no way he's folding an ace, right? No one's folding an ace in this spot. If he has pocket kings or king queen, he's probably going to call maybe a 2/3 pot bet or less. But even then, he may decide to find a fold. Or he may even call a huge bet if I make my hand look as if I have a busted draw. So I actually think that I like betting very large in this spot with my full house because my opponent's never going to fold an ace, and he's also going to be somewhat prone to look me up with a good bluff catcher like pocket kings. So I bet 32.50, which is slightly more than the size of the pot. I want to make it look a little bit bluffy, and I think this is a good way to go about that. And to my surprise, my opponent makes it 7,000. So notice when I get raised, my opponent's range is almost certainly very, very strong, or he's bluffing. If he's bluffing, he's not going to call if I go all in anyway, so I'm not really concerned with those scenarios. I'm much more concerned with if my opponent does have a value hand, how do I fare against those value hands? So which hands would a reasonable player raise for value? Those are going to be hands like ace-queen, which I lose to, ace-5, which I beat, and maybe pocket queens. And ace-7, obviously, I'm chopping as well. So against that range, I am slightly ahead. And I think if I go all in, my opponent's going to call it off with that entire range. He may also call off with something like ace-king, but I think that would not be a good play. So I'm going to assume my opponent is reasonable enough to fold a hand like ace-king if I go all in, even for only another 3,700 chips or so. So let's think about the possible scenarios where I should either go all in or call. And it may sound crazy to call with the second nuts given this hand is played out this way, but people do slow play hands like ace-queen. So I don't think it's completely impossible. So if I call and win, which is what I expect to happen the majority of the time when I call, I will have 20,500 chips, which is plenty. If I go all in and win, I'll have 24,000 chips. And notice that these two numbers are actually not that different. They are 4,000 chips apart, or 3,750 apart, but 3,750 chips is not that big of a difference when you're talking about 250 big blinds versus 200 big blinds. Their numbers are actually somewhat similar, and those stacks will play in a similar manner. But if I call and lose when my opponent has exactly ace-queen, I will have 3,750 chips left, which is 37 big blinds. And if I go all in and lose, I'll have 0. And there's a huge difference between this 3,750 stack and a 0 stack. So this is one of these odd scenarios where in a tournament, you do have to give up value in exchange for conserving chips, because there is a lot of playability with a 37 big blind stack early in a tournament full of mostly amateur players. And that is exactly what I did. I decided to call in this hand, and my opponent showed up with ace-queen, and I did not show this hand at the table, but I imagine if I did show it, everyone would have been shocked at the fact that, oh my God, how did you not go all in? And this really is an important concept that you must master. Whenever your opponent takes an incredibly strong line, and this is either very strong or very weak when he does this, right? This is a very polarized line, but whenever he does take a very polarized line, and I don't have the nuts, notice I have just almost the nuts, especially if you expect your opponent to be somewhat of an amateur player who may only be raising in this spot with exactly the nuts, you have to be very careful. And that is exactly what I did in this spot. I ended up saving this 37 big blinds, and I ended up running this 37 big blinds up, and I cashed for a pretty decent amount. So, seeing how this is one very important concept that you must master, I actually decided to make a video, a full-length, multi-part video, where I'm going to go over 25 in-depth hands. And each of these hands is going to demonstrate an important concept that you must master to succeed at tournaments. And these concepts will be on numerous topics, but some of them will include when to value bet thin on the river, which is something a lot of amateur players do not do. When to run a wild bluff. Again, most amateurs are not running wild bluffs, and when they are, they're often doing them in inopportune situations. And also, I'm going to be discussing when to make hero calls. A lot of amateur players are deathly afraid of calling off all their chips with a marginal made hand, especially when their tournament life is on the line. And in this video, I'm going to show you when you can make those plays. I'm also going to be covering numerous other concepts from the 2015 World Series of Poker. So these hands are going to be from various $1,500 buy-in events. Numerous hands from this video series are going to be from my deep run in the $1,500 extended play event. And then there will also be numerous hands from my $5,000 8-handed event that I final tabled. I'm going to be discussing hands that led up to the final table and some of the hands that led to me busting the final table. Believe it or not, there will be a few mistakes in these hands that I'll show you the errors that I made, and I think it's important that you always learn from your errors. So I recognize that I am not perfect, and I'm going to show you ways that I am working on improving. So to sign up and to get this video series, click on the button directly below this video, and you will get your copy of the in-depth 2-hour multi-part video series where we will be reviewing those 25 hands. You can download these videos and watch them over and over forever. And make sure that you spend your time studying these, because there really are numerous key concepts that you must master if you want to succeed in poker tournaments. And if you don't like the videos for any reason, just let me know and I'll give you your money back. There is a 100% money back guarantee with all of my poker video products, because I'm confident that you will learn things in them that will help you become a better poker player. So click on the button below this video to get your copy of this in-depth video series from hands, or with hands that I played at the 2015 World Series of Poker. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy your videos.